Consumer behaviour has shifted dramatically over the recent years, and without doubt the digital genie is out of the bottle and here to stay. If we understand that the EU4 is made up of Germany, France, Italy and Spain, they're the four major markets in the European continent, plus the UK, which is often referred to as the top 5 marketplaces. The dealer structure in the UK market, by comparison to most of the European markets, is really quite different. I would say, without being disrespectful in any way, that the market in the UK has matured much more so than mainland Europe. We have far fewer retail franchise points typically than the European market. So an example of which would be that the consolidation in the UK market has been really well underway for more than 15 years. And a large proportion of retailers are owned by a fairly small handful of large operators. Many of those large operators are publicly listed companies. By contrast, the European market has in many respects followed the lead of the UK, and consolidation has been happening in those markets, albeit at different speeds in different marketplaces for some years now. So to put this into perspective and put some meat on the bones, if you like, we're going to look at some statistics. Notwithstanding there's been a fall of approximately 10% in the volume of franchised retailers across Europe in the last handful of years, Germany still has 17,800 main retail points, which account for 33% of the total franchise networks operating across the EU4. By contrast, in the French market, there are circa 21,500 retail points of varying sizes, vis-à-vis the UK that has approximately 6,400 or so retail points. By comparison, the French market has a very inefficient, old-fashioned distribution method because they have 15,500 or so sub-dealers, and by comparison to the UK, we only operate 489 approximately. The world continues to go through a massive technical revolution, every bit as important and large as the Industrial Revolution was to us in the 19th century. It's true to say that automotive retail was slow to accept and to adopt digital services, in part because buying a motor car or a motorcycle, van, is rather a complex process, and it's not one that's really best suited to a shopping cart experience that perhaps we're used to with other retail channels. So Q1 2020, COVID hit, the world closed down, Europe closed down, and in fact the only way that car retailers, motor retailers in general, could keep their doors open metaphorically was to adopt and deploy vast quantities of digital technology, which allowed consumers to transact and keep the cash tills ringing. So during the pandemic, we saw a massive influx of new players to the market, digital-only online sales, keyboard transactions. And these companies, many of which will be familiar to you as a viewer, such as Kazoo, Cinch, Brum Brum, Driverama, Auto Hero, primarily operated across the EU4 and the UK, and were driven by huge marketing spend, which gave them enormous visibility. And during the pandemic, it would appear that these businesses flourished well. However, post-pandemic, the digital online players came under increasing pressure due to availability of stock, which, to be fair, was across the piece, whether you were digital or physical. Nevertheless, it was felt much more hardly by the digital-only players. And of course, we have to wrap into that the macroeconomic conditions that are in the marketplace, the geopolitical issues that we're faced with, and in fact, that consumers, when they had the choice of returning to a normal life, preferred to vote with their feet and go to see and interact and buy from people. Doubtless viewers will be very familiar with the phrase, "There's nothing certain in life other than death and taxes," because everything else is susceptible to change. Never more so when shopping for a vehicle. Now, buyers of vehicles in the UK, across Europe, for that matter, the rest of the world, are more similar than not in their actions. However, There are a number of fiscal and procedural differences in the markets that make up the European theatre that we have to be cognizant of. With the proliferation of self-serve, digital on-demand, access to shopping 24/7, the consumers expect, and in fact demand, transparency, immediacy, and choice. The world we live in now is driven by a consumer-led journey, not like in the old days where it was a dealer-led sale. It has always been the responsibility of the retailer, irrespective of the product that they're selling, to truly serve the customer's needs and wants. And in today's world, that means providing a seamless digital and physical experience. So I'm going to throw out two words, and I'd ask you to hold on to them for a moment. Those two words are emotional and tangible. And the reason I ask you to hold on to those words is that when we actually buy things and when we consider buying things, what's really important in many cases, especially when buying a vehicle or indeed most high-ticket items, is how it makes us feel. The sensation, how we absorb what that product is, whether it's a car or a new suit of clothes or a fancy wristwatch or whatever that product may be. It's how it makes us feel as people and how we absorb that as part of that tangible, emotional buying experience. Never more so with a vehicle, because touching it and seeing it makes you feel good, gives you that smile, that grin factor, and that's what really tips you over the edge 9 times out of 10. Especially when we're looking at products that speak of who we are and how we want to be perceived. And rightly, wrongly, or indifferently, we all do it all the time. Think of digital doing the heavy lifting of a purchase. We all do it. We research, we review, we look at third-party reviews, and we consider. So the digital aspect, the heavy lifting aspect, will take care of 80% of your research. All of the things that kind of aren't really the sexiest or the funnest things to do. The research of the vehicle, the research of finance, the research of insurance services, the application potentially for finance, the suitability and eligibility checking that you can do on many online facilities to see if you'll be accepted to that finance company. That's all the stuff that you can do in your own time, in your own space. The fun and the emotional and the tangible component, the 20%, is the in-person interactivity in showroom with the asset, the product, and the person. And together, that makes up 100% of the buying experience. However, the 80% is absolutely vital that we provide consumers with an immersive customer experience. Because if they don't have the immersive customer experience, they actually won't get to the 20%, which is where the sale happens. So there are a number of challenges that are facing markets across Europe currently. Number one would be a huge shift in changing customer behavior. Number two would be the increased requirement for regulatory requirements. And number three is the economic uncertainty. There has been and continues to be a huge shift in consumer behavior, the way people approach shopping or buying a vehicle. They're using multiple platforms from different providers to research, compare and contrast, and that poses a significant issue to the traditional distribution model for retailers and financiers who are providing auto loans. So in order to remain relevant, these players need to adapt to deliver the services that consumers demand. In respect of regulatory compliance, retailers and lenders come under considerable scrutiny and have to comply to the letter with the requirements. And moreover, I should say, these requirements often shift and change. And if they don't comply, there can be some very serious legal and financial ramifications. Therefore, staying up to date with regulatory requirements and compliance remains a significant challenge for retailers and lenders alike. In respect of economic uncertainty, automotive retail is no different than any other retail sector. With the fallout from Brexit, from COVID, from the geopolitical positions that we're experiencing currently, the war in Ukraine, it's all creating the cost of living crisis, which negatively impacts customer confidence. Of course, with challenges, there always comes a great deal of opportunity. Now, discounting the uncontrollable factors that I've just touched upon and allowing for stable trading conditions, if companies, businesses in general, start to think like a customer, then they will be on the right path. We live in a software-driven world. Dealers and lenders must reinvent themselves to stay relevant. In order to do so, they must embrace technology. By doing so, it will allow them to better engage in the first hand, build superior relationships, maximize revenue today, as well as to future-proof their businesses. They also need to ensure that the transition from digital to physical remains smooth, continuous, and above all else, customer-centric. The biggest priorities currently for lenders and retailers across Europe are: be bold, embrace new technologies, and collaborate to design and deliver customer-centric initiatives. Always provide the 3 C's: choice, clarity, and comparison. Because let's face it, without comparison, nothing can be considered good or bad. Set out the choices and let the customer decide. Because after all, the customer always has been and always will be the very best salesperson. And finally, always think like a customer. Never sell, simply tell, because doing so makes buying easier.